You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, it's time for the Tuesday edition of Leafs Morning Take presented by Bet365 as we get set for the fourth and final meeting with the Boston Bruins this season. Nick Alberga, Jay Rosehill with you. What's going on, Rosie?
Yeah, a little return for a couple of our boys at TD Center. They'll have some good vibes going in there, some of them anyways, but looking forward to this one.
Did you catch the scrum the other day with Auston Matthews, or returning Auston Matthews, and some of the line of questioning regarding the Four Nations?
Sassy Matthews?
Yeah.
I did. Sometimes when reporters try to ask a question all like professionally and like delicately, and it's a stupid question, it's just like, what? Don't you think about beforehand? Like, what do you want him to say out of that? What do you want him to say? The whole world's talking about how Auston Matthews lost his guy and got caught veering and floating, and the tournament was lost because of it. One of the bigger games of recent memory. And you ask him, like, and then you try to like sugarcoat it. Like, oh, you just barely missed that pass. Oh, it was so close. Like, oh, I'm not blaming you, but I'm gonna bring up how that was on you. What do you think about it? And he can just see it coming. And I like it when he gets those sassy replies, man. I think he handles the media just fine.
And it's funny you say that, because talking to some people, they're like, I've never seen Mitch Marner that peachy with the media the way he was at the Four Nations. Just, even the feel-good story of scoring the OT winner and how he sort of dreamed about that and playing with those guys. Like, we don't really see that personality. But maybe it's a day-to-day of talking to the media in Toronto. Is that it?
I don't know. Mitchie's just kind of like standoffish. He kind of answers everything he says is kind of a statement. Yep. Well, we go out, we try, we do our best. We try to do the things. We show up to the things. And it's just like, I don't know. He's kind of always got this FU chip on his shoulder to the media. Maybe you think that's justified. Maybe you think you don't. But yeah, dealing with the media in Toronto every day, it's just a feeling when you're in that room and the media come piling, and you can see them outside. There's a million of them, and they come piling in, and they're very intrusive. Their cords are everywhere, and you can't even get to your seat, and everyone's jockeying for position. And then they go and they do the big thing, and they just can't wait because they got to run and write their column. And it's just this intense thing where when you're in Florida, it's just like the same 4 or 5 dudes and ladies come in. Hey there, Matthew. How are you? Yeah, what's going on? Hey, I got a couple things for you. Yeah, you bet. Sit down. What's going on? And it's just more personal, and it's less. It's just the nature of the beast. I'm not blaming anyone, but it's just becomes such a, it becomes very trying in Toronto for those players that are getting it every single day. And sometimes if they get a little short with them, I really honestly I can't blame them.
Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, N-A-T-I-O-N. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. Still, the fallout continues from the Four Nations, and the way they've been handled by the media in the States, you would have thought the U.S. won that tournament. Matthew Tkachuk was on the Tonight Show last night. Brady Tkachuk was on Spit and Chicklets. These guys are on a tour for losing.
I know. Can you imagine if they won? My God. I don't know. It's good that the Americans are where they are. But like, for how fired up they were, like, I honestly believe they thought they had it win. They were acting like they thought they had it win. They were acting like they were told by some fairy godmother, "Hey, you guys are going to win this thing after Saturday." They were like, they're like Brady's Sally. It's just like everything about it was just like, we are so cocky because I assume we got this thing won. And I think that was to their detriment a little bit, but it's crazy because of how close the States has been at quote unquote dethroning Canada. You go back to, like, what do you go back to? 02, 2010, 2014, World Cup in 2016, 2025. Four Nations face. They're over. They're a bagel. They're zero. Like, they can't even, as close as they are, they can't even claim that they're close. Like, you're bagels across the board. It's kind of funny, but that's not to say they're not close. They are very close. I think any tournament, the Olympics coming up, could be the one where they get Canada, but the big boys and the studs just have that extra juice for Canada, and it's got to piss those guys off because they are obviously passionate and very good. But it is a little funny seeing them do a world tour as if they took Canada down this year. I got to go look at that interview. I'm sure there's some light shed on it.
Oh, it's a great interview. It's great for the game. They asked him about the 3 fights in 9 seconds, and he's being such a meathead. Yeah. Me and my brother both went. You lost the tournament. Sorry, buddy. That was classic USA. That you're celebrating, like premature celebration, and obviously on social media, it's a cesspool. Got all these Americans out of nowhere being like, it wasn't a real tournament. Where were you a week ago when this is the greatest American game of all time? It's such bullshit. That's why I'm actually celebrating this win. And that's why I feel like there were bigger stakes to this tournament overall. To beat the US the way they did, I love it, dude.
I know it was a big deal. Like I had a tweet that kind of went off, and I'm like they're going, "Oh, we're 1-1. We're 1-1." Like in the Super Bowl, oftentimes you're playing against a team, two opponents who have played each other in the regular season. If the team that lost that regular season game wins the Super Bowl, they don't call it a tie and say, "Oh, we're 1-1." You won the big one. You won the one that matters. You won the one that you had to show up for that people remember. And that's exactly what happened in the Four Nations face-off. Whether it was a quick tournament or it doesn't matter. The game that mattered was the big one, and maybe it would have been different if that Saturday night game had a different result. And honestly, looking back, I'm totally fine with them dropping that Saturday game with all the rough stuff against the Americans because it set the table for the big W in the big game. But yeah, pretty American of them to be doing a little world tour, as probably didn't even mention the fact they lost the bloody tournament. Just kept talking about Saturday, I'm sure. So I'll have to go check that out online.
That was the best part of this thing. I just saw like a clip. It was like 1 minute and 50 seconds, but they were talking about the first game against Canada. Didn't talk about the fact they didn't win the championship. It's so American, man. It's funny to me, but every time I hear the word close, I get PTSD. Tavares last year after they lost, they're close. Dak Prescott. I don't know if you caught that a month ago. I don't even watch football. I was on some random channel before Overdrive started, and Dak Prescott, QB of Dallas, was talking. He's like, "We're close." Close to what, man? The Dallas Cowboys haven't been close to anything. So every time I hear that word, I get some PTSD. But you were so right in that post. It's to me, it's like similar to being like, "Oh, that team won all the regular season meetings, so they won. They won the season series." It's like, no, the team that won the playoff series won the season.
I know if you go 4-0 against a team in the regular season and then you get swept, you say, "Well, we're tied. It's even. It's even. We should play another game to see who the best team is." Like, Jesus, that's a bad take, but that's American for you. I honestly think that for how they were acting and how confident they were to lose that and then be, let reality set in, I can't imagine how devastated those guys were. A little bit sheepish, maybe a tiny bit of embarrassment. I didn't have any problem with what they did. Like, I'm not saying you can't act like that. Hey, I loved it. They were jacked up. They're confident in themselves. They made the intensity level crank up to 10, which is fantastic. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's just amazing that Canada's on top still if you're Canadian. And the fact that what that did for hockey down in the States, you look at the numbers of people that were watching, who was talking about it. It's kind of crazy, man. This was what we thought maybe a rinky-dink tournament. Remember in October and November, we're talking about it going, "Oh yeah, the Four Nations face on." They're kind of making fun of it. If you would have said it would have been one of the most important tournaments in, I don't know, 15 years, a decade at least, I guess, till 14. And it would have popped off in the States the way it did and got the eyeballs on the game and brought the attention to our game the way it has, especially, right around the same time when the NBA was just having a mockery of an all-star game. I mean, their game's in shambles. You're looking at guys making $50 million a year in that thing, and they have those huge TV contracts, and you watch it and know what's going on. I mean, their leader is an absolute joke. They pull the pin all the time. They take maintenance day, play half the bloody games. They quit on their team all the time. They're such individuals. Their all-star game and everything else is a joke. I mean, it's in shambles. People were ripping it online like crazy. And then to the people that don't really know hockey, go and look at what happened in that Four Nations face-off. It's no wonder it popped off the way it did. And I hope it continues with, some of the people maybe jumping ship and saying, "I'm going to give this hockey thing a try."
The Tkachuk brothers got hurt. to not win a tournament, but that's burying the lead in the States. Grew the game quite a bit. I'm sure they'll make a movie in 10 years from now and they'll change the ending and the Americans would win in triple OT. But quite frankly, we remember what happened. This other narrative that drives me crazy too, just to wrap on this conversation, is this whole thing that Jordan Binnington stole the tournament for Canada. He made 3 or 4 really good saves, which you need sometimes from your goalie. I thought he was okay in the tournament. I thought that was all Canada needed. A good enough goaltender around a 900 save percentage, you're going to win the tournament. But the narrative I'm hearing is that this guy somehow stole the tournament. Insane.
No. It's funny that's the narrative, because when the teams got announced, everyone's going, "Oh, you think you're going to win with those goalies? Look at ours." And you look around the league and go, "Oh my God, look at some of these countries." The timing of it, it's not really, we're Miss Carey Price, and there's usually like a French stud goalie that's in one area or the other. There's not really that deal, and Binnington hasn't been fantastic the last couple of years. Obviously, the most recent thing was him winning that cup and kind of putting his name on the board there, and he's kind of known more for his antics and physicality in the crease and acting silly. But he just showed up big when we needed him. He didn't steal the show. It's not like everyone around him did phenomenally, whether they wanted to scrap or play physical or, play solid D or, light the lamp or grind or finesse. It didn't really matter. Canada could play anything, and they happened to get those, I would say, 2 to 3 saves when they needed it. That's just what you need out of a good goalie that's pulling his weight. That's exactly what Binner did. I think it's a bigger story because no one knew if he had that in him. Everyone was terrified. Like before that gold medal game, everyone was like, it's going to depend on Binnington. If he lets in a weak one, he let in a week 1 or 2 every single game that tournament, and was like kind of that little weak link potentially. And in a position as important as goaltender, in a game like that, you can't have that weak link. You have to have a guy stand on his head. That's what he did, and it was phenomenal, and it was probably the lead story aside from McDavid, but it's not like he stole the show and goalied everybody. He just did a fantastic job is what was needed.
JS in the chat puts it perfectly. Binnington was clutch. Very well put. He was very clutch in OT of the championship game against the States. Dinner Bells writes in, rumor is Matthew Tkachuk is out for the season. Not what I'm hearing. It sounds like it's a groin issue. It sounds like he's going to return at some point in time. But the interest for me is what does this mean for the Atlantic Division? If Tkachuk is forced to miss 5, 6, 7 weeks, are the Leafs in the driver's seat for the Atlantic is my question.
Well, they already are. They're getting their heels nipped at all season long. But I mean, to lose a leader like Matthew Tkachuk is massive for that team. It would be, I know we got a few big boys, but he's their leader. He's the guy. You watched it in that tournament. What he brings to the table is contagious. It's pure intensity and energy and leaving it all on the table. And you're talking about a team that's had so much success in the playoffs recently, mostly on the back of that guy. If they don't have him, and they had a good team when they didn't have him and they just weren't anywhere close. I think he is the heart and soul of that team as far as getting all the other players to buy into that style of play and follow his lead. And then it becomes their identity. And they've been the best team in the league as far as playoff hockey in the past 3 years. It's been phenomenal. So to lose him is huge. That's not to say he can't come back rested and just pick up right where he left off and put the whole team on his back. I would not be surprised to see that. But in the stretch here, when he's down, I think they're going to miss him. And I don't think they're going to be chugging away on those points, nipping at the heels of the Maple Leafs the way they have been.
In support of Sick Kids, KPG sends us this super chat. Really appreciate it. Hats off to Coop for sticking with Binnington. He knew TD Garden is where he comes up big like 2019. Yeah, that was the big story going into that game, is how he did it in Game 7 of the Cup final and does it again. And I wonder how Matthews and Marner were feeling. Matthews specifically now 0-7 in potential elimination games or ending games, and he just can't seem to win that game at TD Garden. And Binnington goes in there and wins and wins and wins. But just an unbelievable tournament. Already looking forward to the Olympics next year, 2026 in Milan. Presented by Fountain Tire. Join us for Flight Night on Saturday, March 8th at Greta Bar YYZ as we host a watch party for the Toronto-Colorado game. As part of Flight Night, one lucky winner and a guest of their choice will win a spot in the first ever TLN Nation vacation in Nashville, happening March 20th to 23rd. To be eligible, all you need to do is purchase a $10 ticket for this event at nationgear.ca. That's nationgear.ca. And you'll automatically be entered into the raffle draw. On top of that, you can buy additional raffle tickets for the draw for $20 a pop in support of One Broken Biker. We still have a few spots to fill on this trip, by the way. We're offering 2 packages, one with flights, $24.50 plus tax, one without, $12.99 plus tax. Hotel rooms are double occupancy. For more information, again, on how to book, head on over to nationgear.ca. Check out our link in our show bio as well. Life's too short for ordinary vacations. It's pretty wild, Rosie. We're less than a month away from this trip. And all I could think about over the weekend was the trade deadline. And I don't even want to talk about the scenario. Like, we've been building this around Luke Schenn. What if Luke Schenn's no longer a Nashville Predator on March 20th when we go?
Very possible. Very
Yeah.
possible. Anything can happen. That's the wide world of sports. I can't tell you how many times I got traded, called up, or sent down when I had family visiting me. It was
Wow.
like clockwork, man, almost to the point where I didn't want anyone to come, unless I was on the Marlies or in the minors or something, and then I did get called up. But they have a plan. You have a plan in place. They're on their flights. They got everything set. They're staying at your house, and just see you later. You got to move on. So that very well could happen, Schenner. His services are valued these days. A right-handed rugged defenseman with a ton of experience is something a lot of teams could use, including the Maple Leafs. So you know what? What if he's on the Leafs and he's playing in Nashville for the Leafs? Now we're talking, hey?
I wouldn't be allowed to do the interview. That's what I'll tell you that.
I like it. But yeah, a possibility. It is coming up fast, though.
It would be the Dikembe Mutombo no interview for you. We'd have to find somebody, maybe somebody on Broadway. We could just pull some people on Broadway about the Toronto Maple Leafs. But looking forward to tonight's edition of the Leafs Nation After Dark with Zach Phillips. Also got a fun interview coming up with Jeff O'Neill of TSN, former Toronto Maple Leaf. This should be a good one.
Yeah, those Overdrive boys have been breaking it down lately. It's good to see. So see what he's got inside track as far as the Maple Leafs and some trade talk, as we are clipping very quickly towards that trade deadline, as much as the nation vacation is coming up here. Before that is the trade deadline. So lots coming down the barrel, which is exciting.
10 days away is the trade deadline. Where does the time go? At the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Roll Up to Win is back at Tim Hortons. Rosie, show that cup. And that means you can win millions of amazing prizes with just a swipe of a thumb. Imagine turning your routine Tim's run into an unforgettable vacation with sell-off vacations, a $1,000 racket and cash prize, or an all-new, all-electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz. You only have until March 23rd, so open up that Tim's app and get rolling. Play Roll Up to Win on the Tim's app today. Rules apply. Canada only. No purchase necessary. Visit the Tim's app for details. Yeah, these are.
You got a lot of reads lately, man. It's the time of season where there's some sponsorships flying. I mean, we got to pay your salary, producer Vix. That's not easy. So we got to rattle these off, but you're doing a good job. I'm surprised you haven't passed any to me yet. It's
well, I mean, if you want to start reading, you can do the reads for me. If you'd like to. We love Tim Hortons, though. I'm happy that Roll Up to Win is back. Going to get my first coffee later on today. You can do it in person, but we're really promoting the app, so make sure to check that out. But some curiosity from the morning skate. Calle Jarnkrok on the ice for the morning skate here. How about that?
Calle Jarnkrok. Nice to see. Yeah. I'm hoping, I'm looking at the roster lately, and the one that stands out to me that's just like, is Max Domi. Like, 48 games played and 3 goals? Like, that has just been a consummate monkey on the back for the entire season. A guy who you hoped would kind of outplay his contract and be a factor in the way that you could get a lot of scoring depth and some contribution out of him. Hasn't been that way. But you look at Calle Jarnkrok and say, now there's a guy that could come in and be a factor and be kind of a staple and be reliable and be that guy that chips in and makes his line mates better. Really looking forward to that. And we haven't seen him all year, like this hernia thing. My goodness, it's it is quite the pain in the arse apparently, and he has had some setbacks, and now we're looking, at March right now, and he's just starting to get on the ice. So it's exciting to hear that he's close. I wonder. I mean, with the Leafs, it could just be any day. All of a sudden, he's just in uniform. So looking forward to him. Expectations are somewhat tempered, but I know he's a guy who can be effective. So I'm kind of quietly got my fingers crossed for that.
In its own right, it's like getting a deadline edition internally, which
Mm.
again, people are down on Calle Yarncroke. He had a tough postseason, couldn't score in 7 games, and had a really banged up year. But people forget what he did earlier in his tenure with the Maple Leafs, and that was produce and provide secondary scoring. I just wonder what this means. Is he close to a return? I know it's deadline time. Maybe you're showcasing, hey, this guy's available. Maybe he's on the trade market. There's a lot of questions for me coming from this fact that Calle Yarncroke is at the morning skate for this Maple Leaf team. But say he's ready to go, where do you insert him into the lineup right now? I'd probably say the fourth line to start.
Yeah, probably to start just minutes wise and getting your wheels going. I think that makes sense. If he stays there permanently or not, I would just like to see, some depth and some consistency. It's tough when you have a lineup where you go down like past the top six and then it just drops off, and all of a sudden, instead of getting bolstered by some of these guys out playing their contracts, it's like a liability. And I'm not saying that's what it's been, but that's when it's a tough look, and you're kind of scrambling for spreading the minutes out and what spots do you use these guys in. It's nice when you have a third line that's buzzing, which it was. You get that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you see that connection again with that third line of ours, including Nick Robertson. If he can play and contribute the way he did last game, I mean, that's huge. And then if you get some layering going on, like with a Calle Yarncroke, say he can hit his stride on that fourth line with those guys, and all of a sudden it starts to look a little more solid back there. But we'll see where he goes. Honestly, it's just about getting his game speed and his feet down and getting used to the timing and testing his body out. It's going to take 3+ games to even get that, where I don't think it's fair to really judge him until you let him get that under his belt.
Because I view him as a bigger asset than most people. I like that he shoots right. I love his versatility. If you recall, like Sheldon Keefe was a big proponent, big fan of Calle Yarncroke, played up and down the lineup. And it's a new coach now. We'll see how he adapts. We really haven't seen Yarncroke in this setting in the Craig Berube system. Maybe he flourishes alongside a lot of other guys who have taken that next step under Chief this season. So like therein lies the intrigue. And I actually think, believe it or not, Yarncroke's going to make a bigger difference than people think. Like the way people talk about him in this market, it's like this guy's an American Hockey League player. No, he's a really decent NHL player with ability. So I want to see how healthy he is. If he comes back to this lineup and can produce, I think this is a big thing for this team.
Yeah, I know he's one of those guys who you don't expect the world from. I mean, I haven't been looking, but to hear a whole bunch of negativity around him, I'm like, who are you comparing him to? Are you comparing him to Willie? Like, what's the standard here? He's a guy that can play in the bottom six, a ton of experience. He can be really responsible. With his experience, he understands what's needed. He's seen it a million times. He's been through different seasons. He gets like, oh, these are the holes that need to get punched. And then say you get an odd man rush, you get an opportunity. He's a guy that can bury, that can finish, that can complete the play, and has the skill to get the job done. So that's kind of his ceiling on what would be needed out of him. And it's just a matter of getting him to that level, which, as you mentioned, he's very capable of doing that. I don't see what the shade is. I wouldn't bet my farm that he's going to be that guy, but the potential is certainly there, and that's what we're hoping for as we hear him coming down the barrel here, getting ready to rock and roll.
Not surprised, but Anthony Stolar is in the starters net here at the morning skate, so it appears he'll get the call here for the Maple Leafs, their fourth and final meeting with the Boston Bruins. By the way, they've picked up at least a point in all 3 previous outings, 2-0-1 against Boston. Dare I say they've turned a corner against the Bruins, at least in the regular season. But I don't want to call it a must-win. Every game is a must-win. It's such a cliche, but Boston's so dinged up, specifically on the back end. You got no Hampus Lindholm. You got no McAvoy. Like Mason Lohrei is like their number one defenseman. You have to find a way to win this game. And I think the added sort of flag on top is the fact that they can really bury Boston. The Bruins 1 point out of a playoff spot right now.
No Hampus? What happened,
No
Hampus? Yeah, I mean, the fact that they're on that 3-game slide, I think they're going to be, I don't know, man. You could take advantage of it. On the other hand, you got a team that is desperate, that is fighting for their life, that is going to, throw the kitchen sink at you. So it's going to be interesting. I'm paying attention to the start. I think they're all going to be going pretty hard. And with the Leafs having success coming right out of the Four Nations face-off, you could argue that they're maybe due to kind of like maybe mentally not be totally into one. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but it's an interesting dynamic of these two teams being in totally different spots. And then you add that extra element of the history these two teams have. I'm going to be paying attention a little extra close tonight.
Well, I think it's a good storm for the Leafs because the weekend was all about the depth guys. And at some point in time, Matthews and Marner will awaken from their slumber of a hangover from the Four Nations. And
Hangover. Wow.
Well, they've been quiet. I mean, calling a spade, they've been quiet. They've looked a bit fatigued. I think I'm not chirping anybody. It's truth. Watching those two guys, especially Marner over the weekend, I totally get it. But what I'm getting at is the fact that at some point in time, they're going to wake up. They're going to wake up and do their thing again.
Yeah, agreed. I'm just giving you a hard time. Yeah. It's awesome to see the depth come out like that. I mean, with that third line there, Domi finding some Cam, McMahon's kind of a guy who's playing out his ass this year, which is just phenomenal. And then you look at, Lorentz and Steve's having some success with Camp on the fourth line. It's just, that's what you're looking for. Guys that click, that understand, that are capable of doing, standing out and being productive and being noticeable with the minutes that they get. And the further you go down the lineup, the less minutes and opportunity these guys get in situations to have success. So when they're able to find it, it's huge. And that's why they rely on chemistry a whole lot. And looking at their lineup, like, I was a proponent of Steve's coming up. Like, why wouldn't you play him? He's come in and played a couple of games and looked phenomenal and had a major impact. So, like, if Yarncroke was ready tonight, would you yank Steve's out of the lineup? I just don't. I don't like, if it's what have you done for me lately league, and I'll repay you for the success that you've had. How do you pull that guy out of the lineup? Being a right-handed shot, where does Yarny go? It's interesting. And then you look at another guy who could easily come out would be Robertson, who's been in and out in the past. He's been on fire. So interesting time right now. I'm kind of glad that Yarny's not coming back right now because these guys are firing on all cylinders on the bottom six. We'll see what they have tonight against the Bruins, though. That could change.
So Matthews and Marner are returning to TD Garden, first time since the Four Nations final last week. But my curiosity again lies with Boston, who I'm sure will be a team of interest around the trade deadline, where it's like maybe this is the year that you sort of recoup some assets and retool and come back stronger next year. That's probably not going to fly in that market, but this is not the same Bruins team we've seen the last decade. Like, the goaltending's been okay, the defense has been okay, and they really haven't recovered from losing Krejci and obviously Bergeron. Like, it just hasn't been the same look to this team. They've tried their best, but even Brad Marchand is a guy who I think was a tertiary piece in that tournament for Canada. Like, age is real, and he's getting a bit older and longer in the tooth, and it's unfortunate, but he's just not the same guy, and everything revolves around David Pastrnak right now with that team.
Yeah, well, if you think about how long the Bruins have been good and been dominant, been a threat, and like, what do you expect that just to never end? It's going to happen. Like you mentioned, the pieces that they've lost, including Chara, and then Marchand is, like you say, was a big piece of it, but he was a piece of a machine. He wasn't the whole engine. And now that he's even older than when they were really dominant, it's just impossible to expect them to be that way. So it'll be interesting to see, where the brass's head is at on what's the best way to make the Boston Bruins, really competitive again. Is it sticking with these guys? Is it moving on? Is it taking a step back and realizing that it's going to be a couple years to get back to where you want to be? It's always the big question for teams in that situation. Do we pull the pin on some guys and get some assets back, or do we stick with it and see if we can move pieces around and continue to get better with what we have? It's always tough. We'll see where they're at. I'm glad the Leafs aren't there. That's kind of what I remind Leafs fans when they're struggling or whatever, when there's negativity around them. Like, don't forget where we are. There's going to be a time where they're at the Boston Bruins era, and it's like, we've lost XYZ. This guy's getting old. This guy's not playing up to his contract, and we really don't have a chance to win anything. It's tough, and the Leafs aren't there right now. So enjoy this ride while you have it. They're first in the Atlantic. They're dominating their former foes, and it's a good place to be in when you think about the Boston Bruins and where they're at. It might shine some light on that fact.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can do so. Sir_Gods writes in, everything Leafs want to trade is worthless. Interesting. Jeff McQuiggan writes in, Leafs should go after Anderson out of Montreal. Burlington boy, a big body, but he's a winger. Like, I think you direly need a center, and it's not a misconception. They do. I think Max Domi's better served for the wing. Would you agree?
Yeah, it seems that way. He doesn't seem to love it. Seems to make a lot of his plays and have his success from the wing. I don't know if he loves having the responsibility of being the centerman and having to help the D out and usually coming in late, being the third man high into the ozone. All those things are different factors. But yeah, I think a centerman would be good. Producer Vic was saying Trent Frederick, a guy we're going to watch tonight. Is a guy that could probably drive a line very well and be a huge addition. What it would take to get him, hard to say, but doesn't have a massive cap hit. Former first rounder. He's had a lot of success. He's played on a successful team. He's got experience under his belt. And the biggest thing for me is he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He plays heavy. He's kind of a tough kid. And for a guy that's 6'3", 220 with the skill and experience that he has, who plays a little on the edge, that's just music to my ears with a Maple Leaf sweater on.
Yeah, Frederick's very ideal for me. He's played more wing than center, but I think he grew up a center. So, like, I think the potential is there, but he's certainly a guy I would have earmarked for my bottom six. And just what he's done to the Maple Leafs in recent memory would excite me. But it gets back to the old conversation about Boston and Toronto. Can they trade? Will the Bruins help out their opponent? I guess if you give the best offer, they'll make the trade regardless. No?
I know, but like what was mentioned in the chat there, everything we have to offer, like what you're not,
Yeah.
Nyes isn't a part of anything. Bobby
Yeah.
McMahon isn't a part of anything. The guys that have value on the back end, they're not going anywhere. Like it's just a classic. You want to add, but you want to get rid of the garbage and add quality. Like, well, it's just tough to do. It doesn't work like that. I'm this whole talk about the trade deadline for the next 10 days, as people continue to talk and it ramps up, I'm still just going to be sitting here going, well, for what? How? Yeah, these are all great names people are throwing around, but how do you convince that team to let go of that player? And what are you going to offer them to say, yeah, let's shake hands? I don't really see what we have, and we're kind of thin in that department. But I know Tree, that first rounder is in play. There's only one of them, I think, not even this year, 26, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. And then you have the Minton and Easton Cowan, where Cowan's stock has been dropped pretty heavily since the December when, he didn't exactly have a great showing in the World Juniors. So I don't know, man. It's tough to envision, but crazier things have happened. That's why we watch. But I'm almost taking a back seat saying I don't want to say anything. I just want to see what cooks out here.
They've been very consistent in saying they want somebody with term on their contract in terms of centers. But if you're getting somebody like that, chances are you're probably going to have to give up a bit more. And that's why I wonder, again, about one of these prospects. I think it's just so fascinating to see what they'll do when it comes to like the prospect system and who's available, who's not, and who's even available on the roster. But you're so right. Like players of value, not really on the roster right now, right?
Well, I mean, what are we talking about? Nick Robertson,
Yeah.
or what are we talking about here? Who's
Yeah.
going to be a needle mover? Who's going to entice a team enough for a GM to, like you say, you're dealing with Boston. They probably don't really want to give a leg up to the Leafs and Trent Frederick. They understand what he's worth, and what do you have to offer to get them to unload the guy to you? And then you got the whole cap situation as well, which it goes up next year and whatnot. But I'm kind of thinking this year, like what's happening this year? What can you fit in? If you're going on a playoff run, are you going both feet in this year? I think they should be. How do you make that work? It's a lot of moving parts, and the salary cap era is no easy time for a general manager, but that's why we watch.
10 days away. The following interview is brought to you by Charm Diamond. Centers get custom ring building delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece Program, an unbeatable pricing policy. Charm Diamond Centers is proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972 with more than 85 locations across the country through Charm and their sister brands. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. As you bring in former Toronto Maple Leaf from TSN is Jeff O'Neill. What's going on, how are you, bud?
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Hey, our pleasure. We're just talking, obviously, about the elephant in the room, and that is the trade deadline. 10 days away. How do you see this playing out for the Maple Leafs?
Let me look. Let me think. Probably the same as the last 5 years. They're going to try to bring in two good players, and I think you just gotten to the point, and just talking with Jamie and Brian for a long time about this. they can go out and get a Braden Shen or a Scott Lawton or whoever you want it to be and add another defenseman. But I think it's just going to come down to whether the guys that have been there the longest, can there be a playoffs where, one of the Maple Leafs goes Braden Point or one of the Maple Leafs goes Kucherov? And we're talking about the obvious guys. Like, can Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews and William Nylander, can they be the guys that continually light the lamp? Because what have we talked about the last bunch of years? Mike Johnson always brings it up because we always start ranting and raving how, they're not tough enough. They're not cut out for this. And he says, you know what? They didn't score. They don't score come playoff time. So I think it's, they can go out and get whoever they want, but it's just going to come back to those guys that have been there the longest. And if they can break through and carry them along the way, that's what it's ultimately going to come down to.
And at the end of the day, that's how they built this team, right?
That's right.
You put all the eggs in that basket. Well, there you have. Those are the players that got to get it done. And I think that, that's what all the naysayers of Marner, it's not necessarily a personal attack on Marner. It's just the fact that if you extend him, then it's literally you have the exact same formula that you've had for the last how far do you want to go back? Same thing. And it's like kind of like people are saying the old saying, you do the same thing over and over again, the definition of insanity. Are you going to commit to the same thing that you've seen for the last 8 years?
Rosie, people dub me some kind of Marner hater because I don't want his contract signed ASAP.
Yeah.
And I've said it a million times. It's not about Mitch Marner. It's about the same guys that don't win. Was the Vegas Golden Knights, or were the Vegas Golden Knights kind of aggressive and looked a little bit crazy at times for switching things up? Because they're not going to sit there and accept losing. So they change it up until they get the right recipe. Was it aggressive, and do I recommend that all the times? No, not exactly. But you got to commend them for saying, we've got to keep trying to find the right mix. We've got a solid base here. I just don't know why you would want to go. Like, I remember back in the day, and I give Shanny credit for showing faith in his guys. He said it was after the second or third one. I can't even believe we have to, we can count years. He said, we like our players and we're going to keep our players. So he showed good faith and he liked his guys, and, maybe they can reward him and do something special. Excuse me. But to just lock up, like we're talking about Auston Matthews possibly after this season being around for 3 more years. So you got 3 years and you can completely change the dynamic of the team. And it's not necessarily just about Mitch Marner or John Tavares. It's about having 3 or 4 guys making that much money. Like, we used to have the argument, I'm sure you guys did too. Can a team win with one guy making $10 million on the team? One guy. And the first team to do it, I think, was Vegas with Jack Eichel. So we haven't yet got to 2, let alone 3 or 4. So just the idea of having something different. Like my dad always says, he's like, if those guys come off the books, I'm pretty sure you can sniff around and make some trades or free agency and bring in some pretty damn good hockey players for that amount of money. It doesn't have to be one guy just because he's a Toronto kid and he's Mitch Marner. I think everybody, like if they fizzle out again, that's about enough, isn't it? Like, come on.
Well, the problem, that's what we've been saying all year, and we take heat for it because Mitch is a good player, and a lot of people's kids have his poster on the wall. Like, that's great. It's not.
He's a great guy too, Rosie. Like, this teammates love him. Everybody in Toronto loves him, but it's nothing against him. It's just the timing that his contract is the one that it's up. They locked in Nylander. They knocked in Matthews. I do not know what's going to happen with John Tavares. I would show no urgency to say we got to have you back too, because you can get different players. But it's not Mitch. It's nothing about Mitch, but it's the mix. It doesn't work. And I mean, it could work this year, but if it doesn't, there's no way in hell you could go back to the well.
And if Tree's talking to him saying, here's 13 million, and he's going, not a chance I'm doing 13, and the writing's on the wall, do you just like, it seems to me like the most likely scenario here, unless they like win a cup or at least go deep in the Eastern Conference Finals, like you just lose Mitch for nothing. He's going to go to free agency and away he goes. That's a tough pill to swallow. Although you open up that cap space with, if you're a tree and you know that team isn't signing what you're willing to give them, you just come up and say, "Listen, I'm unloading you. Can you like make it known that you're waiving your no trade and get everyone on board that could be interested in you, and you do everything you can to move them for something?"
He ain't going anywhere. Like, what are you talking about? He's just gonna say, "Don't even think about moving me." I totally am on board with that. When a player signs the old no movement, no trade, I think it's disrespectful even to ask, because it's like that's the deal, and you knew what it was,
Hmm.
and they knew that. I think that if they went to him and said, "Hey, like you're not signed," I don't even moving him is not even on the bingo card. It's not even an option. They're either going to try to win with him this year, let it play its course, and he's going to sign somewhere else in free agency. But guys, you saw with Rantanen, like he was trying, like if the agent and the player are trying to, if it's just going to be about the number that's filled out on the contract, like I'm pretty sure that the Colorado Avalanche had a number in place where Mikko Rantanen could have played the next 8 years alongside Nathan McKinnon, who's one of the best players in the world. So you've got to think if Rantanen loved Colorado, I'm sure there was a deal to be had there. If they didn't want to go the route of I want to be the next one and I want 14 or I want this, so I'm sure the same thing would be available for Mitch. It's like if you just want to say I want more than Auston Matthews and that's my number, then he's probably going to have to do that somewhere else. I don't know for sure, but there's probably a number there where it's like you're born in Toronto, you get to play for the Leafs. Do you want to play for X? And if him and his agent are just like, no, it's got to be this, then it's probably going to be somewhere else.
Boys, the bigger thing for me is like Colorado, similar to player. He had a limited 12-team no trade. Mitch Marner full autonomy to do whatever he want, and that's the bigger thing for me is like Joe Sakic, Kyle Dubas, that conversation. But we're talking a lot about the four nations and trying to blend in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Do you think this could be used as sort of like a stepping stone for Marner and even Matthews, who I thought was really good in the Four Nations final?
You know what? It's a moment, and I think if you look at great players, we're talking about 4 series of, you know, 4 men, 7 tops, and it's like you got to do that over a 2-month span. And I think that's like we touched on it earlier. If you watch the performance of the guys on this team throughout the past years, it's always the Pasternak that scores in overtime, or the Matthew Tkachuk, or somebody else on the other team, like Cousins, or it hasn't been the Maple Leafs. So, yeah, I think it's a great moment for Mitch Marner to prove to himself that come clutch time, he can set up the tying goal, he can set up the winning goal, possibly score the winning goal. So, I mean, I think it would be crazy to just say he had that assist with Connor McDavid, and now all of a sudden he's going to be a playoff warrior. It just doesn't work like that. It's something that he could possibly draw off of and build on and be like, throw me out there. I want to make a difference, because we haven't really seen that in the past.
Mhm. It is interesting. Moving, we were talking about between the pipes yesterday, kind of comparing like the Allmark Swayman deal and how they were handled and what we have now. It's pretty refreshing to be following the Maple Leafs and see what they have as far as goaltenders right now. Do you think, as we creep closer towards the playoffs, you got to start to lean towards a number one, or do you kind of like switch hitting them like they are right now?
I like the rotation right now, and we talked a lot about it with the Boston goaltender situation, where I was like, my big philosophy or my big hot take was if you got 2 goaltenders, sometimes you don't have one. And I believe they tried to rotate in that one series where they went back to one guy and went to another, and it was like, but maybe that's how they're at their best, where they're just not carrying the mail and one guy isn't always in there. Like I said, do I think you can win a cup like that? I'm not sure. There's no scenario I can look back at and say, yeah, do what they did. It's always like one guy's in net and they're in there. And it's like, I just think of the alpha dog, like a Vasilevsky or a Shesterkin, where that guy's in the net, or a Bobrovsky, and they're just there and they're awesome. They might have the odd moment where they kind of flare up, but for the most part, it's them. So I'm pretty sure down the stretch, they're both going to be looked at, and You know, there is that kind of trust factor with Wall. It's like, you know, he seems like he plays well. He has those super games, and then all of a sudden they have to kind of just take him out. And like, I think they use the term like he's played some emotional games lately. And that kind of got my attention where I'm like, okay, I understand that, but come playoff time, it's emotional from the drop of the puck right until the cup is handed out. So can the guy handle it? Like that's a massive question. So as of right now, it would kind of make me lean Stolars, but I think if Wall, like if he can get into a rhythm and kind of start looking a little bit more grizzled and more like a veteran and he can handle the workload, I love the idea of him being the guy come playoff time. Whether that happens or not, I'm not sure.
In support of Sick Kids, KPG sends a super chat here. Ask Dog if he thinks Leafs should go after Sam Bennett. What do you think of that?
I mean, that's not happening until the summertime. There's no way in hell that the Florida Panthers would do anything with Sam Bennett. He's one of those guys where if he leaves that roster, and it's so difficult to win, you see like Montour leaving Florida, and if Bennett leaves Florida, like they got their cup, and then it's so tough to stay competitive afterwards because guys' contract. I love Sam Bennett. Like I love how he plays. I love him in the NHL game, and I love him come playoff time. It's crazy to think where he was like this kind of smallish skill speed forward, and now he just seems like an absolute monster out there. It's crazy how he's kind of transitioned in his career.
Well, he's the one who couldn't do a chin up, no?
Yeah, so much for chin ups. I mean, I don't know. That's just one of those things. But he plays so big for a guy that's not that big. Like he's the real deal out there. I can't speak highly enough about Sam Bennett.
Do you have a favorite trade deadline story,
I don't know. I mean, one of my favorites was Marty Brodeur asking me in warm up if I was going on the bus with them back to New Jersey, and I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I hope not," because I've heard horror stories about how Lou like sends private investigators to check up on guys' behavior and drinking beers and stuff, and I'm like, I don't need any of that. So that's kind of how I knew my time was up in Carolina when Marty Brodeur is asking me if I'm coming on the bus with him to the airport.
Interesting. That's a tough combo, my man. Really, really appreciate your time today. Enjoy the next couple days leading up to the deadline. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, guys. Great
Thanks,
to see you both. Cheers.
Take care. The one and only Jeff O'Neill, one of the best. I just love how direct he is, man. He's blunt. Similar to you, Rosie. I like that.
Oh, if something is what it is, why not say it? Like he says, this is just what it is. And you can try to reinvent the wheel and come up with weird scenarios, but if they're not realistic, why spin your wheels and waste your time? I like that approach. It's fun to do, and it kind of leans some clear perspective in a lot of directions.
In support of Sick Kids, we got a super chat here from Travis Freeman. Should the Leafs make Marner the highest paid player who's not had 100 points? I don't think so. Wow.
He's on pace this year, right?
I don't think he is anymore, just because, yeah.
Oh, and everyone talking about what an incredible regular season player. Well, he doesn't have 100 points. Lots of guys get 100 points. I don't know. And when we're talking about the Tchucks and the Bennetts and these guys, like they have that grit and that FU, like said, it's 2 months of grind, of battle, of, not just like withstanding the charge, but the guys that win are the ones leading the charge. They're making it a battle. They're wearing the other team down. They're sucking the life out of them emotionally. You have to have that personality and that style of play to just smoke them. And I don't know, like he said, you've got the Austins and the Willies, and it's just too much money. And again, I think I think he is a great player, and if he were to go to another team, he would have success and be a great player on that team as he is on the Leafs. But you kind of already got the bed that you've made, and you got to lay in it. And do you want to really? It's tough to think that you're going to give him that much and handcuff yourself cap wise and have these three guys make that much bloody money when we've already seen, like, if you've never seen it happen in the playoffs, you'd think, well, let's give it a try. He's too good to let go. But we've seen it for years and years and years. They don't do anything in the playoffs. And I as much as anyone hope it's a different story this year, but all we know is what we know.
I could read the headlines right now. We're running it back. No, thank you. No, thank you. I already said last year I was going to throw my computer out the window. There wouldn't be a podcast yet. We're still here. Thank you to Hurt Locker 66. Writes in, put Marner on the third line. I mean, Boy Soul. That's who I'm thinking. He's on pace for 103 points. My math is never correct. He's got 71 points in 56 games. So on pace for 103. It's going to come down to the wire. But it truthfully would be a really cool story if Marner finally gets there, just because of how close he has gotten in recent memory. The high ankle sprain a couple of years ago. And I don't think it makes a difference in free agency if he gets to 100, if he gets to 98. But Mitch Marner's had a really, really good year. And that's specifically a guy I'm looking at tonight to be like, hey, it's time to pop off here against the Boston Bruins. And I think only time will tell in the Stanley Cup playoffs if we're going to see a different version of Marner, Matthews, Nylander, and company and finally get over that hump. Travis Freeman sends us another super chat in support of Sick Kids. EP40 as a 100-point season. JT Miller as a 100-point season. They got paid. They got paid way less. They get paid way less chatter of paying Mitch like a guy who's at 140 points and like 50 in the playoffs. My mistake, but I'm just trying to read this thing.
Is that you reading or this guy spelling? It's one of the
No,
two.
it's a bit of slangy. It's a bit of slang. But he's trying to say, compare.
He can't
it
even
loosely.
read.
There's no commas in there. He's trying to compare it to EP40 and JT Miller, not putting as much stock, I think, to Mitch Marner and 100 points. Appreciate the super chat. Travis Freeman sends us another super chat. Leafs morning take is the best. So this guy is single-handedly winning our trip to Nashville.
We like those ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I don't know. This time of the season, it's fun to come down to the trade deadline. I kind of wish there were more opportunity for the Leafs, but like O-Dog said, it's an interesting take. I mean, but like, what do you do? Say the same thing every bloody day? Like, yeah, it'd be great. You could get a nice centerman, a nice right-handed defenseman. That's not going to get you to the promised land if the big boys play the way they have always played in the playoffs. Like, it's just, no matter what they do, it comes down to them. You have to have that McKinnon, Crosby mentality where you just take over wave after wave and you're the one driving the engine and you win games on your own. That's what Willie and Mitch and Auston Matthews have got to do this postseason. And at the end of the day, that's why it's so simple. It's cut and dry. You've built the team that way. Here's some really good players. We like them so much. We're going to sign them all to this max amount. And they have to be the best players in the world when it matters. It's as simple as that. Like O says, the other factors, they're not going to be the deciding factors. It's simply with those three.
My apologies, Travis. I'll try to read this again. EP40 has a 100-point season. JT Miller has a 100-point season. Full stop. They get paid way less. Stop. Chatter of paying Mitch like Draisaitl, a guy who's at 140 points and like 50 in the playoffs. Understandable? Sure. You get it? There you go. Thank you for the super chats.
It's very true. And like,
yeah.
The other thing is no sandpaper, like no grit, no drive, no FU, no absolutely throw yourself into the fire when things get crazy, when things get a little tougher and ruckus and, tensions are getting high and things are boiling over and the physicality comes out. Mitch doesn't elevate his game. He's not the one driving that and creating that environment. He shies from it a little bit, if you're being honest. And again, you mentioned all those guys that get paid that money. When you think about what they do, all signs point to you can't give Mitchy boy $14 million.
I'm going for recency. He was great in the Four Nations final. John B writes in, if Leafs get two Shen's guaranteed finals appearance, what do you think of that? Rose?
Hey, I like the Shen boys. Good Sasky boys. Again, if the big boys are big and they score the overtime winner and they get 2-1 in a game here and they spread it out and they're driving the charge, absolutely. I believe this team could win the whole damn thing. The potential is there. But the eggs are firmly in those three guys' basket.
I won't lie. I think I may or may not have got a message from Luke Shen's PR team regarding the question I asked you on yesterday's show, pick a guy, Braden or Luke. And I think Luke found out you picked Braden. So you picked Braden over your best friend, Luke Shen. So
no, I didn't post it for that reason.
You're such a coward. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm just thinking about like what are they more desperate for? And it's irrelevant to those two players. It's like a D-man or a centerpiece. But yeah, I didn't post that just because I didn't want any questions being asked.
That was the best when Lucas got traded to Toronto, and he got fired up because he thought I wanted him out of the lineup
Kinda
for the
did.
playoffs.
You
No,
kinda
I
did.
said nobody else is coming out, and we all know this, and it has to be Justin Hall or something coming. I don't know, but I justified it. I told Shenner when we talked to him too.
You
I
said the
wasn't trying
Leafs
to.
should scratch Luke Shen and go with this lineup, and he was
No.
not happy.
Fuck off. The
Yeah.
Daily Faceoff Trade Deadline Special is coming away on Friday, March 7th from 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. Instant reaction, expert analysis, special guests. Whatever happens, the DFO crew will have you covered on deadline day, March 7th, 11 a.m. Eastern time, Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. And maybe Rosie will go on there again and talk about wife swapping if two brothers get traded.
If it makes sense, that's what I'll say. It's got to make sense. And
That
made
was our
sense.
moment. That was our moment for that show. We were front and center for year one of that Daily Face-Off YouTube trade deadline show. And ever since, we've had a really diminished role with that show. We got to get to the bottom of why.
I don't know. Well, I don't know if it was last year. What year? There was one year where I was just on the camera like for 3 hours, and I'm like, I don't have anything left to say. It's tough, those deadline shows, but I don't know. Again, with this season, I'm gonna brush up on some other teams' needs and wants and what's going on out there. But I don't know. I just can't get all amped up for the Leafs trade deadline this year. Just simply because of the factors we have stated: salary cap and what you have to offer, man. And it just doesn't add up to a whole lot of action come that March 7th deadline.
Tammy writes in, speaking of which, is the Leafs Nation podcast doing a trade deadline show, or is it on the Daily Face-Off? We're going to do a reaction show like we have done the previous couple of years, where I think around 4 Eastern time, we'll pop on live and we'll react to trade deadline day. I anticipate, by the way, the Leafs making moves in advance, of the trade deadline. So I don't know if it's going to be much of an impact, but we're going to uncover anything that sort of is around the Maple Leafs too in their division. We'll talk about that. That's coming up, of course, on March 7th around like 4 Eastern time. So we're not going to have a real show. We're going to be in a different slot, if that's okay with you, Rosie.
Yeah, so you got the DFO stuff and then a reaction to what happened. I like that because you're like, okay, saddle up. This is what we got. Now we know there's no more moving and shuffling pieces around. This is it. This is the crew. Let's roll. And you have a little reaction show, which is fun.
Boy Soul writes in, Alberga should get Rosie to write a Daily Face-Off article on the needs and wants from all 32 teams.
Oh, that would be ugly. I don't like that. I like putting my focus on one outfit, not spreading it across. I only have so much bandwidth here, guys.
Yeah, the guy's a busy man. Anyways, it's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, NATION. Give me an Auston Matthews anytime goal tonight. I know he scored the empty netter the other night, but it's been a while since he's beaten a goalie. And this includes the Four Nations. So I want a Matthews ATG tonight.
I don't mind that. Is that plus money tonight, I wonder? Very well could be.
Possible. Yeah.
Usually he is the front runner there. I have going to the well of my first period over 1.5 goals scored. I think Boston's going to be coming out hot, and I think the Leafs are, like you say, they got their depth pieces going. They're rolling again. They've picked up on the right foot after the Four Nations, and any one of those top three boys is ready to pop off. So I think all that adds up to more than 1.5 goals scored in the first period.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll see plus 110, according to producer Vic, for Matthews.
My bet yesterday, I don't know if anyone's tracking, the over did not hit, Nick. I'm sorry, in the Winnipeg Jets game, but Scheifele did get a snizzle, although it did not look very plausible for a while there. But yeah, they snuck into overtime and got her done. That was cool.
That's why you don't bet on favorites, gross favorites. It was like plus 360 or minus 365 or 465 for the Jets to win that game, and they scratch and claw in OT to win. Like Morrissey ties it in the final minute. Yeah, right.
Scary times.
Okay, Rosie, we'll leave it at that. Coming up tomorrow, a full recap of this Leafs Bruins game. And again, they're going to have a couple days off before they hit the road. And game 3 of the trip on Friday against the New York Rangers. So we'll continue to tee that up. Might try to get some guests on to tee up the trade deadline coming up as well. So lots of moving parts. We inch closer and closer to the trade deadline, the nation vacation. Solid job today, buddy.
You too. Appreciate it. We'll see you in the morning.
Sounds good. Many thanks to Jeff O'Neill at the Leafs Nation 4-1 here on YouTube. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button on the way out. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to producer Vic. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.